All right, as I understand it, we are recording, so here we go. We are now in part 2 of the mechanics of local carbon reduction. We're going to talk about the processes. Now, last week we talked about what people can do individually and how to learn all the basics of it. Now, just so there's no confusion, the reason for teaching you all that is so you understand the lingo and some of the basic mechanics of what it means with emission factors, etc. And just doing all this on a personal level is, just to be clear, not enough to push away all the greenhouse gases. It's just a way to understand how the process goes and to also develop your own credibility and your own courage in being able to explain this to others. So one of the most important things you can say is, I've done this, or I've tried to do this, or I know about this from a first hand, not, gee, you ought to do this and I've never done it, but go ahead and do what I say, not what I do. You lose credibility real quick that way. And as the initial title of this was a climate change boot camp, we're now going to do more boot camp stuff than the general stuff that we did before. So now we'll move into it. And oh, we're still getting more people coming in. Okay, get this off the screen here. Okay. So we're going to do a boot camp, not a kumbaya. In essence, this session is going to focus on actions leading to measurable cuts in carbon and cost. We're not going to be writing policy statements. We're not going to be banning plastic straws, and this is as much fun as that may be. And we're not going to ask anybody to become a vegetarian. So for the next hour, that kind of what we call nuts and bolts talk, nuts and berries talk is out, and nuts and bolts actions are in. This is a picture of a progress in one of our rooftop systems in Croton. This is what we're going to get to, is how to get that stuff done, really make the equipment and the changes that are necessary to measurably be able to reduce our carbon impact. Now, last week we had an executive summary, which I'm going to repeat just so it's clear to everybody. Do not be discouraged by the fact that barring major technical breakthroughs, there's no way to avoid that 1.5 degrees centigrade rise in world air temperature. It'd be great if we could, but even if we fail at it, we have to move on beyond it. We do not have the opportunity to say, oh, we didn't make the 1.5 degrees, we failed, now let's go fishing. We don't have that option. We've got to move ahead as best as we can with what we've got. This means that we have to focus. And I'm going to say that focus a number of times because it's really, really important. Like politics, all greenhouse gas reduction is local. Focus on local. What you heard about in California or heard about in Britain or something may have no relevance to what you're doing in your town. Use governments. This is in case you fall asleep during the rest of the presentation. These are the main points. Use your governments to expand your options and capabilities. And I put the emphasis here on the word use. You're paying your government. Use it. Make it work. And focus. Trying to do everything at once. Put up a barrier to flooding, ban the plastic straws, clean up the weeds. Trying to do all those things at once is the same thing as doing nothing well. You only have a limited amount of resources, unless you're really, really rich, in which case I don't know what you're doing here. If you don't have all the money in the world and all the people in the world, focus. You've got to get everything, try to do the best you can with what you've got. That means focusing on a small number of projects each time, not everything all at once. And always, always seek the most results with the available resources that we're going to discuss today. The personnel time of your group, what knowledge you have, the money that's available to you, how do you access opportunities and leverage to push and make things happen when some entities say, well, I don't know about that. Leverage is when you say, look, I got a paper here that you wrote out that said you've done going after a 20% reduction in your greenhouse gases. And all you've done so far is nothing. What about that? Is it going to be made public that you haven't done anything? Leverage. Sometimes you have to push. You use the existing venues and tools. Don't reinvent wheels. There are plenty of wheels out there right now. Too many people say, oh, I haven't seen my government do anything, so I'm going to create a whole new organization. No, we got plenty of organizations. Work with the ones you got. Look for greenhouse gas projects that also make or save money. We're going to talk about that a lot, because if there's not going to be any money made, it's not going to happen. What this boils down to, just to finish our executive summary, is that you're going to become project developers. No, you're not going to be dealing in real estate. You find an opportunity, you total up the benefits and costs. If it still makes sense, you then go out and find the resources to make them happen. That is the process here. find the opportunities, total up the benefits and costs, get the resources to make them happen. Now, going beyond our executive summary, here's where we get into the weeds. You remember that Al Gore wrote and did a very good movie called Inconvenient Truth. Well, I'm going to add a few things to it. I'm going to add to it 5 unfortunate realities. Part of the problem in dealing with this stuff, when you get right down into the trenches to do it, is that there's a lot of misinformation or things that are misunderstood. You'll find that a lot of typical media and activist articles on energy and climate change, while well-meaning, are not well edited. You will find many of them make claims and make statements where they are off by a factor of 1,000. I just was looking at one today. I do a lot of this professionally. I get an article that says, oh, this country over here is going to put up 1,075 gigawatts of offshore wind. I said, well, that's a lot. That's going to almost equal to the entire power output of all the power plants in all of the United States. You're going to do it on wind? No, it turns out it's supposed to be 1.075 gigawatts, which is, about 1,000 megawatts. So the article went, completely off the rails because they didn't have the decimal place in the right place. You'll find this over and over again. Someone says, oh, such and such is real cheap. You could install that. That's no problem. Well, when you actually get down to the nickels and dimes, a lot of the stuff we have to do is much more expensive than people realize. Here's your 5 unfortunate realities. Few options can zero out the greenhouse gases from a source like a town hall or a boiler or a skating rink. You can get it down low, but you're not going to get it down to zero without incurring a very high cost. Zero is usually unattainable. It's not a useful target. Get it as low as you can with the resources you've got, and then move on to another project. All megawatts, that's MWs, of power are not equal. 5 solar megawatts make less actual energy than 1 nuclear megawatt. Well, how can that be? And why do we keep reading about this? Say, oh, we're going to put up 6,000 megawatts of offshore wind. Fine, great and dandy, but that's just barely enough to replace what we lost with Indian Point. Now, I've been an anti-nuclear activist for over 40 years, but I do want to mention that nuclear power was clean. It creates all kinds of problems for future generations, but it was clean. When you lost 2,000 megawatts of nuclear in Westchester County, 6,000 megawatts offshore might just barely catch it up. A lot of climate activists, a lot of journalists are confused or deluded. They don't understand something called capacity factor. So when you see, oh, Governor Hochul says we're going to put up 10,000 megawatts, cut that by a factor of 5, and then you're going to get what the actual impact is relative to the power plants that are disappearing. Another unfortunate reality. The largest greenhouse gas source in the United States was once power generation. And we've been working on that for years and getting the greenhouse gases down. That's being very successful. But now the big bugaboo is fuels for transportation. That is a much tougher nut to crack. One of the things I learned in the last couple of years after we got a lot of other things done in Croton, LED street lights, LED in the building, cleaning up all this, doing all that, solar on the rooftop. So once you've done that easy stuff, you're then looking and saying, well, what do I do about those garbage trucks, those diesel garbage trucks? And what do we do about the diesel school buses and all that other stuff? And I began to look at it and realize, oh dear, unless we come up with something really fantastic like a cheap electric garbage truck, we're not going to replace that diesel. It's much, much more expensive. That's unfortunate reality check number 3. Here's number 4. Natural gas, which we want to, and oil, which we want to stop using, are also raw materials as well as fuels. 1 out of 6 units of oil or natural gas is not used for fuel, it's used for materials. Remember I showed you that chart about how we are addicted to fossil fuels, addicted to oil, coal, and natural gas? That addiction goes all the way down into what we are sitting on, what you are doing. Stop and think for a minute about the buttons on your shirt, the threads in your clothes, the heels on your shoes, the tires on your cars, the roads that you drive on, the actual monitor you're looking at right now. They're all made of hydrocarbons, plastic, or whatever you want to call them, the other things that they get made into. Putting in this notion out of keep it in the ground, that's a bumper sticker. It's not a realistic approach. You could cut out all the fossil fuels in the world. Still, roughly 1/6 of everything that's taken out of the ground is still going to get used unless there are ways to replace all of those other raw materials. Remember when you got your COVID shot? What was that syringe made out of? Plastic. We are addicted to plastic as much as we are to everything else. So understand that when they say keep it in the ground, that's not a realistic approach. You can say don't burn it, but keep it all in the ground, not going to happen. That's one reason why it's so important to reduce methane emissions from oil and natural gas drilling, because that's going to continue otherwise, because otherwise we're still going to have to go after all of that material to make stuff, not just burn it. And last but not least of our 5 unfortunate realities is that the fact that net carbon reduction, that's how much you save versus how much more you use, that is happening, that net reduction, much slower than many activists think. Look at this chart. This is just pre-COVID, and this is US energy-related CO2 emissions. What you see is that it's going down from 2020, but then you see it going back up again. One of the unfortunates of energy efficiency and renewables is that the more you put out, that's great, but at the same time, economic growth and population growth is putting out more greenhouse gases. It's much more difficult to get that chart down, lower that curve than many people think, because there's multiple things happening at the same time. Just as we're saving, we're also consuming more by putting out more people. All those things make it more difficult. And if you see anything in the newspapers about, oh, well, a net zero town, of which there are about 5 or 6 maybe in the United States. I hate to tell you this, but when you look closely at the claims of net zero, not so true, not so true. Might be true on the electricity, but that's only 30 or 40% of the actual greenhouse gas emissions from these towns. When they say they've reached net zero, they're talking about electricity. Nothing to do with the cars, nothing to do with the trucks, nothing to do with the boilers. So I hate to say it, but most of those net zero towns and claims of net zero this, net zero that, they are not net zero for all of the fuel usage and energy and electricity usage. It might just be for electricity. But unfortunately, many of the people who write these articles don't know the difference between a kilowatt hour, and a BTU. And so a lot of it is bunk. So let's get to the good stuff. Who is pursuing the climate actions that we want to work with? Here, I'm going to give you 4 different levels: national, state, regional, and community. In the middle column, you've got the government agencies at each of those levels. A lot of it is alphabet soup: NYSERDA, NYPA, DEC, blah, blah. All of those acronyms and abbreviations are defined in the 8-page glossary that you got. If you have any trouble, go back and look them up. We're going to explain a few of them. Then, if you look at the non-governmental organizations, NRDC, that's Natural Resources Defense Council, EDF, Environmental Defense Fund, etc., all helpful, but mostly for organizational and political, not for nuts and bolts. Believe me, I've worked with many of them over the years. When it comes to actually figuring out, oh, gee, what's the greenhouse gas reduction of a rooftop that has 300 kilowatts? I couldn't find anybody that could answer that. And I realized, oh, that's not what they do. If you look at the state level, what you'll find is that there are also chapters of the non-governmental organizations, very helpful on some things, but not on the nitty-gritty. You get down to the regional level. Sustainable Westchester, very good organization. Federated Conservations of Westchester County, good organization. Still limited on the technical level. Hudson Valley Regional Council, that is a contractor, and I make a note here that anybody that's got an asterisk next to their name, they're a contractor to a state agency. What that means is that some of your taxpayer money is going to pay them. Hudson Valley Regional Council, Sustainable Westchester, they're like your employees. Make them work. Otherwise, you're just not taking advantage of the fact of where your money's going. Most of the other groups, very good again for organizing and marching and literature, that kind of thing, but not on the nitty-gritty. At the community level, you've got your conservation advisory councils or your conservation boards, basically the same thing, and your sustainability committees. At the non-governmental level, there's lots of environmental groups, a lot of climate initiatives, but in the end, you're going to go and look at the state, county, and community level contractors, because they are best for assistance and resources, and they can help you learn the tools of the trade. Things like portfolio manager, which is how you benchmark buildings. We'll get more into that as we go along, but in this chart, the main places you want to look is what can help you at the regional and community level, and especially those that have the asterisks. We'll describe how NYPA and NYSERDA are helpful to you in a few minutes. But this is to give you an idea as to what kinds of agencies are out there and where they fit in to the overall effort to try to make things happen. So who do you go to for the major sources of your assistance to really get things going? The very first of these is NYSERDA. NYSERDA is the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority, hereinafter known as NYSERDA. It will offer you technical help. It'll offer you grants for energy services and projects. I am presently working on 3 projects now from which we got NYSERDA grants. One is for air source heat pumps, another one's for a solar rooftop, another one is for a heat pump water heater. They give you money. They have programs. They also have a lot of good technical services. They run something called the Clean Energy Communities, or CEC program. A lot of the activities in that program have immediate greenhouse gas impacts. Good program to be in at the municipal or regional level. DEC is the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation. They run a program that sounds very much like Clean Energy Community, but it's called the Climate Smart Community. I didn't make up these programs or why they have similar names and why they'll confuse you, but they're there. It's what you got to work with. DEC also offers grants, not quite as lucrative. A lot of NYSERDA grants, maybe 75% up to 100% of the cost of a project. DEC is a little more stingy. They'll offer you 50-50. You want $50,000 from them? Fine. You put up 25, they'll put up 25. It also offers various types of organization, like the CEC tasks, where they say, here's a bunch of things you have to do or want to do if you want to get a grant from us. Here's all the rules for it. A lot of it is written in bureaucraties. It's more complex than CEC. I've worked on both programs. I've gotten grants from both programs. I'm just warning you, a lot of it is paperwork. If you want the money, be ready to handle the paperwork. Climate Smart Community goes beyond greenhouse gas. It also goes into resilience, things like flood reduction and save the trees, that kind of thing. Many of you don't have the expertise, and I understand that. So here's a source of the expertise. If your village or town gets its power from the New York Power Authority, which is basically all, except a few, of the towns and villages in Westchester County, almost all of them get their power from New York Power Authority. It's delivered by Con Ed, but they get the power from NYPA, New York Power Authority. If you're in that situation, your municipality can go after low-cost power. They already have it. Your schools are probably also getting NYPA power, the public schools. It runs something called Clean Energy Solutions. That's a group where they can provide technical help, project management, and also financing through low-interest loans. In essence, putting out the money to install your project and then getting paid back later over time. If your municipality instead gets its power, they're talking about not just the delivery, but the actual kilowatt hours. If they get that from a utility, either Con Edison or NYSEG, then it's got to go after assistance through NYSERDA. NYPA does not do this kind of assistance unless the municipality gets its power from the New York Power Authority. I know these are layers of complexity. It's the reality where we are. Last but not least, make these guys work, is Sustainable Westchester. They work with all kinds of programs, including the agencies and utilities listed above. Go after Sustainable Westchester and get them to help you. They're there to help you. They have lots of grants and things to do that. If you don't go after Sustainable Westchester, you're leaving money on the table. So those are your major sources of assistance. Now, I've talked numerous times about resources. Let's get into them, because if you don't have resources, you're not going to get anywhere. All the activism, all the fervor, all the marching, all the signs, without resources, get you nowhere. You have to have the resources to support the activities. Before you start a project, develop your resources. I've talked to numerous organizations and they say, well, we want to do something. We want to do something. They say, how many people you got in your group? Last count, 3 or 4. So you're not going to get anywhere with 3 or 4 people. You need more bodies. You need more activities. My committee, Croton Sustainability Committee, has 8 constant workers, supported by 4 interns, supported by at least 3 or 4 other associates to whom I'm continuously handing out jobs to do because we all don't have enough time. So we're working with a group of roughly 12 to 15 people. If you're starting off too small, you're going to overburden your people real quick. So one of the first things you want to look at is what kind of personnel time is available to you. Are your committee members just volunteers with day jobs? That's the norm. That's the norm. You may not be able to do things. This is why you want to focus. You want to look for opportunities, and this is the mantra of the day, that yield the most metric tons of equivalent carbon per year from your group's available person hours. Oh my God, how do I figure that out? Any job can be broken up into little small pieces. Somebody says, oh, we want to have put an electric vehicle in every garage. Well, it's a nice idea. I don't know about that. Have you thought about how many people that is? Your community's probably got 5,000 or 10,000 people with cars right now. Do you have any idea how much work that is? Start breaking the job down into smaller and smaller pieces to the point that you can say, oh, that one, that'll take us a week. That one will take us 2 or 3 days. That one's going to require a month. So you begin to see just how long some of these things take, how much effort there is. Let me give you one little useful detail. Any good project that's worth doing is going to take a year. If you don't have a year to put that out there and do it, it's going to fail partway through and you'll have less than you started with, because then people will feel like they failed. If you can't keep up with something for a year, don't even start it, because it's going to look bad when it fails. What knowledge does your group have? The answer is you're always supposed to be expanding this. You're doing that right now. That means you want to know what kinds of actions, what kinds of programs are already underway in your area. Has your town already done community choice aggregation, otherwise known as CCA? Has it become involved in CEC, Clean Energy Community? Has it got involved in Climate Smart Community, CSC? Has it thought about community solar? This is why I have to put all these things in abbreviations, so they take way too long to even write out. What does your local energy cost? Don't go based upon what somebody said it costs in California or Canada. Look up the numbers where they are right where you are. You can get valuable numbers from municipal electric bills, municipal fuel bills, which may be a lot lower than you think, because if you buy electricity from NYPA, it's about 20 or 30% cheaper than Con Edison. That means that the payback periods, how long these things will take to pay back, may be longer than you think. Good information for emissions factors, that's EPA, Environmental Protection Administration. Generalized information on the cost and of installations and where the usage is, that's Energy Information Administration. That's part of the DOE, Energy Information Administration. There are links to all of these in the documents that you were given. NYSERDA, I told you about that. They got lots of good data. Don't depend on something from Facebook. Anybody can post any nonsense they want onto Facebook. And please don't use activist sources. One of the things I do for my commercial customers is I look and see, oh, so-and-so in California put out a study that says, yes, we could all convert to heat pumps tomorrow and it only cost $1 million. They go back, oh, should I do that in the apartment house I'm running? I say, let's go take a look. Turns out the assumptions that were made were something left over from heaven. The cost to put in a heat pump, which I just looked at doing for my own house, if you're doing it when you're building the house or when you're doing a gut rehab to replace your boiler and your air conditioning anyway, that makes sense. To do it as a way to save money, payback period way too long, even with the incentives you could get. But you look at something on Facebook and they say, oh yeah, next thing, the best thing, sliced bread, get yourself a heat pump. At the bottom, you look down and see, this is from a manufacturer or a seller of heat pumps, like an HVAC contractor. Don't believe the HVAC contractor, get it in writing. These are all things that make it more difficult, it may seem, but they're all the realities you have to deal with. Now, what about money? You're always going to be pursuing any government or foundation grants. Just because you get grants from NYSERDA or DEC does not make it so you can't go after private money. You also want to look, if you're going to promote them, any kind of upgrades that are done for homes or small businesses, look and see what kinds of rebates are available from the utility. You'd be amazed sometimes. These programs come on, they're thousands of bucks. For a heat pump water heater right now, if you're in Con Ed territory, it's $1,000 to put in a heat pump water heater. That's almost the entire cost of a water heater. Doesn't cover installation, doesn't cover the electrical connection, but it's a nice chunk of dough. Also look at your municipal budget process. When you go to any kind of town or village and say, I'd like $100,000 to put solar on a rooftop, they go, well, that's not in the budget. You should have been here at the beginning of the budget process last September. If you'd asked us last September, maybe we could have folded it in. Look at your municipal budget process and see how to get your fingers into that so that when it's time for the budget to come up, you try to get a piece of the action. It may not be big, but it'll be something that's getting funded ahead of time. You may not call on the money for 6 months to a year, but it'll be there. Here's a question or a statement. Our village needs to hire a new commissioner of public works. How do we get a good one who is educated, maybe experienced, cares about sustainability and climate? That's in the job description you put together for when the job is put out to bid. Sometimes it means you have to get your finger into the pie and say, look, village manager, what are we going to do to make sure that person has these qualifications? There are certain types of professional certifications that you can get. Certified energy manager, sustainability papers that they have. Ask for them. Ask, where have they done this before? If they haven't done it before, it might be something wherein you say, gee, if we're going to hire somebody, let's make it mandatory that in the first 6 months, they got to go and take a course in sustainability, one on climate change, one on resilience, whatever it is, that be part of the mandatory beginning learning process for the person who's hired so that they are educated and do have some understanding. But you may have to get in on the process before it occurs. Too often people say, oh, that was the wrong guy to hire. And then the village manager says, where were you when it was time to hire him? Did you want to put anything in the job description? Where were you then? This sometimes means you have to be aware of what's going on in your community and municipality to see how to make sure the stuff happens. So professional prep for public works are not in gear for our situation. Normally, the head of the Department of Public Works is somebody who knows how to get the trash picked up, how to get the snow picked up, all that kind of stuff. It's not a mandatory thing right now. It's something you want to request to say, if the person has that experience, let's see their certifications. If they have none and the candidate still looks good, make it so that in the first 6 months, they got to go and take some professional courses on this stuff. Otherwise, they're never going to know what is needed to be done. Donations and low interest loans, all kinds of stuff. Bedford is great. Bedford 2020 or whatever they're calling themselves nowadays. They are great at sucking up donations. My hat is off to them and getting more donations from rich people than anybody else in Westchester County. Give them a great A for that. There are also low interest loans available through NYPA, sometimes through other agencies, which means that you get the money up front, you get the savings from whatever it is you're doing, solar or whatever, then you pay back the loan over time out of the energy costs that you've saved. Sometimes these are called energy performance contracts. We'll talk more about them later. What is this resource we call access? Who can you get in front of? Who can you make your case to? Are there various types of government boards or committees like a Conservation Advisory Council? What relevant non-governmental organizations? Climate initiatives, for example. What kinds of fraternal and religious organizations that may have made a comment or may have put out a statement saying, we're going to try to save the world. Those are good ones to go after because whatever statements they've made, that's leverage to push them and say, look, you said this, now I'm pressing you to do it. Otherwise, you're a hypocrite. So how about this? We're going to put up this solar stuff. What can you do to help us? One of the people in Sustainable Westchester, I don't want to mention names, it has been very good in getting her churches. I think they're all, might be wrong, Presbyterian, I get them mixed up, to put solar on their rooftops. Chambers of Commerce. Anybody that's got a big roof, a good big flat roof, is nuts if they don't put solar on it. In Ossining, Stop and Shop has had solar for years. In Croton, ShopRite, different chain, no solar at all. Sometimes you can use the work done in one place to say, look, your competitor is doing this. Why aren't you doing it? They're making money. Why aren't you making money at it? You got to get in front of these groups and make your pitch. And last but not least, in the world of resources is leverage. And I'm going to get to the sustainable trainings in a minute, Natalie. Leverage is what you use to make people do things based upon whatever blah and talk they've made in the past. Have they made a greenhouse gas pledge? Have they made a climate pledge? Well, you'll find that almost all the states, almost all the counties, and many of the towns that made these pledges going back 10 and 15 years ago have done Zippo. Now is the time to go and look it up. And you can usually go through the town or village archives online and just look for something like pledge or greenhouse gas or climate. And you'll find that in 2009, this village made a statement and joined the Clean Energy Community Program. And all they did was make a commitment to do something, and they never did it. Dredge up those things. Go back and say, why aren't we doing this now? You made a pledge. Let's make it happen. Are they active in any of these programs? Have they joined CEC, CSC? All this is available online. All this stuff is in the 14-page Word document I gave you as to how to get the access to who's in and who's out. What is a PM score? That's portfolio manager. I'll talk about that in a couple of minutes. In essence, it's a way to benchmark, compare municipal buildings or school buildings or others to all the others that are in the same area of the same type based upon their greenhouse gas output per square foot or their energy use per square foot, which they are reporting. You can then say, gee, this school you got here, it's a pretty nice school and all that, but we've compared it to all the other schools in the village and in the county, and you're using twice as much electricity and pumping out twice the amount of greenhouse gases than the guy next door over there. You want to do something about that? Makes you look like crap otherwise. Is there a master plan? Almost every community has a master plan. In there, does it say anything about what's going to do about resilience? Is there a climate action plan? That's a CAP. If it's a religious or fraternal organization, do they have a mission statement, a faith statement, an ESG statement? That's corporations. ESG is environmental, social governance. It's a statement saying, we're a good company, we're going to save the world. You can use those statements against them, or put it this way, you can use them as leverage. Same thing with guiding principles in churches. If you have any kind of information about the mileage on vehicles that are owned by the municipality, there's a way to get the miles per gallon. That was a task under the Climate Smart Community Program. It's called fleet inventory. I thought it was a waste of time, but I did it anyway because I got points. I get the list of all the vehicles and I look at the miles per gallon and go, oh my God, 3 miles per gallon. This is the worst thing in the world. It's going to be really hard. The next time one is bought, let's get a 15 mile per gallon, at least use less fuel. And likewise, anytime there's politics, anytime there's an election, go after the political platforms. Get built in something wherein in the future, there'll be a statement you can look back on and say, look, when you were elected, you said you were going to do X, Y, and Z. Now in your platform, we're going to hold you to that. These resources are very important. If you don't develop them, you're not going to have the strength and the ability to get the stuff done that we're going to talk about. Now, which sustainability trainings would you recommend? Well, I'm going to get into focusing the resources. Let's talk about this training business. Look into the long document that I gave you under Word at the various organizations. We can get into this. It's effectively being that you have to look up the training. NYSERDA is very good at giving you information on this because in some cases, some of their people have this capability. Ideally, you're looking for someone who has taken some courses or has certification in energy management, sustainability, resilience, land management, things like that. And there are a number of them out there. To a degree, there's a certain amount of certification inflation, where some organizations will hand out certifications for practically anything. But if a person hasn't at least got some kind of significant certification, if they have none, that means they're really not interested in the issue. You can get a certification by taking it online for 4 or 5 hours. If they're not even going to do that, I would not want to hire that person. There's lots and lots of training available, also through Cornell Extension, lots and lots of places where they can take classes on this stuff. If they haven't done any and they're not willing to do so, I would not hire them. So now let's focus those resources we talked about. Focus again. Don't take on too much at one time. Look at these lessons I'm going to give you. Limit the geographical area wherein you're going to seek any kind of a greenhouse gas cut. Some organizations say, oh, we figured out how to do something and now we're going to go and tell everybody else how to do it. And they haven't done it themselves. And they say, oh, we're going to teach this thing. We're going to create this for our town. Now we're going to take it to other towns. I say, fine, get it all done in your town first. Show how you've actually done it, not how you've organized it. Organizing is one thing, results are something else. Limit it, just your town, not the entire county. This is going to sound odd. Avoid sustainability, like resilience, that doesn't also cut greenhouse gases. There's all kinds of things you can do to become sustainable that won't cut greenhouse gases. They can be good, but they're distractions. They will unfocus your project. They will unfocus your ability to do things. Focus on things that you know are going to cut greenhouse gases. If you always want to do things like resilience, build a dike to stop water from coming up into the parking lot, that's a whole different thing. Needs to be done, but it's not going to cut the greenhouse gases. Before you start any project or any new approach, review the prior relevant work. You'd be amazed how much stuff has been done and then just become a study up on somebody's bookcase. Go back and dig it out. Find things you can replicate. I'll put this very simple. Cheat, copy, crib, take from what others have done and use it yourself. That'll save you a lot of time. I do this stuff all the time. I go and say, I don't know how to figure that out. Let's go look and see what somebody else did. Let's go look at their climate smart community submissions. Oh, is that what they got away with? Okay, let's take that. Be very nice, change the name at the top, change the name at the bottom, put in the proper numbers and all that, and bingo, we're done with that task. And now we go on to other tasks. Why are finishing these tasks important? Because something like CSC gets you points. Those points will be used later in competition to get grant money. So a lot of this stuff may seem like baloney, but once you finally nail it down and say, oh, that's what I needed 800 points to become a silver certified climate smart community in order to use those points to get $100,000 worth of grants. So look what other people have done, find ways to do it that way and save yourself some time. Especially look at the greenhouse gas savings and the dollar savings versus the amount of time that it will take. I can't emphasize that more. I'll give you an example. A town in Westchester that will remain name unmentioned went out and spent $15,000 to install a solar and wind-powered streetlight. $15,000 for one streetlight. Yeah, they were able to kill off all the 200 watts that streetlight would have taken if it had been converted over to an LED system. But $15,000 to knock off 200 watts, when you do all the calculation, comes out to $30,000 to get rid of a metric ton per year. That's 10 times what it would cost if you took that 30,000 bucks and used it to replace all the old fluorescent lamps in a building. But they made a big deal over this. They said, oh, look, we put up a solar-powered and wind-powered street light. And they drag all the people out and say, this is what we've done. That is not a good use of your person hours or your dollars. Here's something that's going to scare you a little bit, the next two. Realize that an idea that worked well elsewhere may not work for you. Remember I told you I have people in Croton who say, oh, I saw something done in California and Europe that's much better. And I say, we're not in California, we're not in Croatia, we're in Croton, with all the limitations that means. Sometimes you'll say, I've got a great idea. Then you'll work it all the way through and you find, oh man, that's not going to save that much. Oh, somebody's already done some of that stuff before. Well, then don't pursue it. And here's a tough one to swallow. Know that 3 out of 4 of all the ideas and all the projects you pursue are going to fail or not work out. I've looked at all the projects I've done, and I'm 3 out of 4, maybe 5 out of 6. Things don't work out as often as people want to. Oftentimes they're just too costly, or in some cases, we found that one building where I was planning to do some work, turns out the place was found to be filled with black mold. So no projects in that building. Maybe tear down and make building go away and then put something else on its foundations, but nothing in that building because that building is no good anymore. So we had to shelve that project. And never depend on your community leaders to know what to do on their own or just by lecturing them. You can harangue a village manager as much as possible. You can lecture him as much as possible, or her. That doesn't mean it's going to happen. You need to become a project developer. You need to find the opportunity, find the resources, show them how to do it. I had to say this to other committees, the bike pedestrian committees, a bunch of good guys. They wanted to do something and they say, how do you get stuff done of that sustainability committee? How do you get all that stuff done? It's because I do everything and then hand it to the government and say, here, all you have to do is sign. That's the level of work you got to do for the governments. Don't expect them to say, oh, that's a great idea. I think I'll hire somebody to do that. It's not going to happen. You have to do most of the work for them. That's what project development is. And last but not least, of ways to focus resources is be ready to drop unworkable ideas. We're not here to save your ego. We're here to save the planet. If an idea is not working out, dump it and move on. So now, to move you ahead, I'm going to tell you what not to do first, because I've seen people do all of these things and it's the wrong things to do first. Don't waste time agonizing over the climate problem. I went to a presentation a couple of years ago by a fellow who had taken the classes from Al Gore's climate reality project. Good thing to learn how to tell people there's a climate problem, not a good thing to tell them what to do about it. Went to his hour in discussion. First 20 minutes was how he got into climate change. The next 40 minutes was all about how terrible climate change is until the very end. And then I raised my hand and said, that's great, that's real great. What do we do about it now? What did they teach you? Oh, that wasn't part of my training. I said, I just sat here for an hour, listened to you talk about a problem, and you're not going to tell me what to do about it? Don't waste time agonizing. It's a given. Move on to specific local actions. Don't emote or waste your time saying, it's terrible, the world will end. We already know that. Get on to what's next. Don't start another group. We have plenty of groups already, unless it's necessary to secure new resources. For example, if you are a village, you may not be able to get certain types of grants. It just may not be available to you because of the law. Well, then start another group and use it to go after private money, if that's what you want to go after. Usually it's best to join or form an existing subcommittee, something like a climate action committee or a non-governmental organization. Work with something that's already going. They've already got a website. They've already got people. Start with them, create a subcommittee, develop it. Forget greenhouse gas percent reduction pledges. Everybody goes after this. And I sort of says, oh, get a pledge, get a pledge. Worthless. It's only words. 9 out of 10 of these pledges never go anywhere. People are already failing to do them at the national and state levels. Here's what you want to go after. A budget commitment. Next time the budget's coming along, say, you know, we really need to do something in this town here to save the planet. Could we get 1/10 of 1%? Could we get 0.2% of your budget to save the place from being flooded? It sounds like very small, but that's a fair chunk of money. And for somebody to say, we're not going to give you 1/10 of 1%, makes them kind of look bad. That's leverage. You won't even give 1/10 of 1%? Well, gee, what does that mean about your commitment to trying to save this village? And look for projects that have no net cost and get an okay on them. What's a project with no net cost? That's most of what I do. I look for projects and I look for money I can get to match the cost of the project to the cost to the grant I can get. I put the two together. I go back and say, guess what? We can do X, Y, and Z, and it's not going to cost you a penny because I'm getting grants for this. Can I go ahead and do it now? It's very hard for somebody to say, oh, you can't do it even though it's going to save us money and make money and not cost anything. It's a way to leverage the money. It may mean you do smaller projects, but it means you're going to get them started and get them done. If you can say to somebody, this isn't going to cost you anything. It's going to save as much as it costs, and then it's going to pay for itself, and you're going to have money going forward. Who can say no to that without looking like a fool? Forgo public education campaigns unless they are linked to a specific and immediate action or program, something like an energy audit or community solar. Why do I say this? I've done lots of public education. Here's what I found. It's important, but by itself, it does little to measurably reduce greenhouse gases unless the education says, oh, you want to do such and such? You want to put in a heat pump water heater? Here's the money you can get right now, $1,000 right now. That's going to catch the attention. What if I don't do this now? I'm going to lose $1,000. I've been doing energy efficiency for commercial and industrial facilities for over 40 years. You know how I got stuff done? Based upon grants and rebates, because I would say to the owners of the facilities, look, there's this money sitting on the table, and there's only a certain amount of it. Unless you go after it right now, somebody else is going to get it. And then your boss is going to wonder, oh, I heard all this rebate stuff, and you didn't get any of it? Mr. Supervisor, what's wrong with you? That guy came here and told us all about this, and you didn't go after it? What's wrong with you? Money on the table is one of the quickest ways to get people to do something. You can educate them all you want, but believe me, the education will go really far if you can say, and if you do what I'm suggesting, you'll get $1,000 for a new water heater. Oh, tell me more about it, they say. A lot of the public education stuff is very good and all that, but it results in very, very small direct participation unless there's money connected to it. So how do we get you going? Now that I've told you what not to do, here's step one. Assess your local situation. Use your group's personnel to perform the following tasks. List and review the prior actions. Have there been pledges? Is there a municipal upgrade going on for some other reason? For example, they're going to redo the police station. Fine. Can we work in putting in LED lighting at that point? Have they done the Energize or Solarize programs? Oh, we have a question. It says the severity of the drought affecting their water sourcing. Despite projections of population increase, my perception is that people will get totally excited about conserving energy, water, material if the right pitch is made. Absolutely. One of the most right pitches you can make is ones that put money on the table or which can lose money if people don't act. I'm going to say this over and over again. Money moves action. Money makes things happen. Learn the existing tools. Portfolio Manager is a free program available from EPA. It's a way to benchmark buildings. New York City has had a program where all the buildings, tens of thousands of them, there's been a requirement that they be benchmarked for the last, 10 years or something. So those can be rated against each other. A lot of other large cities require Portfolio Manager to be done in any building over 50,000 square feet or 10,000 square feet. You can do Portfolio Manager even without a requirement. You can go to your municipalities and say, we want this done. My municipality has been doing Portfolio Manager now for, 3 or 4 years, something like that. And therefore you get over time an indication of how well the buildings are doing as far as using energy and creating greenhouse gases. And that will then allow you to compare it to other facilities of a similar type, a school, a firehouse, whatever. EPA has emission factors. Remember how we can take a gallon of oil and turn it into 19.4 pounds of greenhouse gas when you burn it? There are also emission factors for electricity, something called eGrid. All this stuff you can learn from the long document I gave you. ICLEI is an international organization that works for communities, cities, regional agencies to get them to lower their greenhouse gases. ICLEI is an organization that your town can join. It has a very good program for doing greenhouse inventories called ClearPath. It's the gold standard. It's easy to use. It's just a big Excel file. That's all it is. Try auditing public greenhouse gas loads. This is using Portfolio Manager or whatever. Sometimes you can find that there's an easy opportunity like streetlights. New York Power Authority has helped people replace their streetlights, which are what are called HID, high intensity discharge. That's the ones that are orange in color, with LEDs. That will cut the usage of electricity by half or sometimes 3/5, and that the units will last a lot longer and they won't wear out as quick. So it's nickel and dime compared to the savings that will occur. You can audit these loads. You can find out that information. And if a town won't give it to you, file a Freedom of Information request. Remember, all publicly owned agencies, including your schools, can be forced to give you information under the Freedom of Information Act. I had to do that for our local school system. They said, oh yeah, we're going to do Portfolio Manager. We're going to benchmark our stuff. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. Never did. I finally had to use Freedom of Information Act and wrench out from them all their electric usage, gas usage, oil usage, and then I did for them the Portfolio Manager to compare them and also their greenhouse gas inventory. And you know what I found? I found that the school system was the largest non-commercial greenhouse gas emitter in the entire village. Whoa, that was a huge lever. That one fact was a huge lever. The school system is pumping out more greenhouse gases than the village, than the library, than anybody else. That one piece of information I was able to use to push the school system into what's called an energy performance contract, which they are now doing, which is a self-financing program that the Department of Education of the state loves. They let you do this stuff, they'll help you do it. And now they're doing it. It's replacing all their lights with LEDs. It's putting solar on their rooftop. It's putting new controls on their boilers. But until I had that one fact that they were the biggest greenhouse gas emitter in the town, it wasn't quite so easy to push to make things happen. So here are these actions you want to go after. Benchmark the buildings. use Portfolio Manager. If you have a problem with this, you can talk to Sustainable Westchester or to NYSERDA, who will give you help on this stuff, or they'll give you a contact to help you with this stuff. Create greenhouse gas inventories, one for municipal facilities. We're not talking the whole town, we're talking the buildings that your police station, your town hall, Department of Public Works, all that you can do. Same for the school system. Do those inventories. It's just spreadsheets. Work on climate action plans. These are things where you can create a document, and they're fairly consistent from one to the other. You can go and copy somebody else's and just use it as a template, and then fill it in with your information. Try to create a climate action plan for the municipal facilities and for the community. These are steps to go in. And each of those, in that order, informs its successor. So do them in that order. Do the benchmark first, because that's going to get you information for the greenhouse gas inventory, which is going to help you do the climate action plan. And do them first on your municipal facilities. That's easy information to get. If they won't give it to you, file a freedom of information request. Then you'll have all of it. Nobody can say no to you. It's better to get them to volunteer giving it to you, but if necessary, force it. Same with the school inventory. That yields leverage. I just told you about that. A community inventory, however, one for the whole community, all the businesses, all the homes, etc. That kind of inventory may be of little use, except in certain conditions. Why do I say that? Because you'll find that most of the community inventories that are created and the tools for them do not use pinpointed data. They're not going to tell you what the Croton Auto Park is using. What they're going to say instead is, here's how much electricity is being used in the mid-Hudson region. And then they apportion that based on population, which is not going to give you any specific data. But you may need to do a community greenhouse gas inventory, because that's a task under the Climate Smart Community Program that will get you points that you'll use to get grant money. So understand that some of these things have limitations, but the ones you want to do first are the municipal greenhouse gas inventory and the school inventory. Both of those will get you information you can use later on. If you don't have funding for any of this, find knowledgeable and experienced activists, or you can go to NYSERDA. They have something called the Flex Tech program. Flex Tech, that's one word, where they will put up grants, usually 50-50, where your community, your village pays a guy or a girl, whatever it is, a person, company, $10,000, and you get another $10,000 from NYSERDA, and they will do all this work for you in a professional way and get it done. If you're going to use other people's stuff, I want to warn you on one thing. Be careful that whatever was done used peer-reviewed work as templates. There's a lot of organizations out there that are trying very hard to do new things, and they're creating tools without realizing that there are tools that are already qualified. I won't mention the name of one, but there's one which claims to show you the greenhouse gas usage per home or person based upon zip code. It's being used by a number of organizations. You put in your zip code, you see what your greenhouse gas inventory is. It's baloney. I took it apart and looked at it. It was created by a college student for a PhD paper, and then got turned into a whole website. And it turns out it doesn't give you anything by zip code. It takes the zip code and puts it in to see, is it in the mid-Hudson region? Is it in Montana? What state is it in? But nothing that is specific to your zip code. When I used that particular tool and checked it out against a professional tool that had been done for our area, it turns out it showed double the level of greenhouse gases. Still not able to pinpoint where it went, but double the amount. I said, my God, what's wrong with this thing? So I got the paper, the actual PhD paper that was written by the student to do this. I began to pick it apart and realized it was using supply chain emission factors, which are appropriate for companies that make things, but not for municipalities that just buy things. So it was completely wrong from day one. So if you're going to use other people's tools, make sure they've been checked out. Better to use something like ICLEI's ClearPath or NYSERDA's own methods for doing greenhouse gas inventories. When you are ready to pursue greenhouse gas cutting projects, and again, if you have a question, send it to me now, or make a note to ask me at the end of my class here. Consider the targets that you're going to go after. There are essentially 3 categories of targets that you want to go after to cut greenhouse gases. The first is the most difficult, That is commercial and industrial businesses. This is the kind of companies I work with all the time. I primarily work with much large companies, oftentimes bigger than municipalities, and their consultants. But you'll find that those C&I, commercial industrials, are already inundated by contractors and others like me promoting various energy products and services. Your voice, unless it's backed up by inside contacts or public pressure, is not likely to be welcomed or heard. Take it from me, I've tried. When appropriate, see if there's any leverage option. For example, has this company issued an ESG statement you can use to push them to finally fulfill it? It may be that it's something wherein you can say, gee, Stop and Shop was put in solar, but Stop and Shop has done it, but you, ShopRite, haven't done it. That's leverage. Why aren't you doing that? Why aren't you keeping up with the competition? Unless you got some kind of leverage, don't bother with C&I right now. Consumers, they may be worth pursuing, but I got to tell you, they primarily act when there's an immediate incentive, a utility rebate, quick savings, when that's at hand. Seek their attention only when you have such leverage. Otherwise, you'll be wasting your time. Even if you have such leverage, here's another one of those unfortunate realities. Only a few % of consumers ever participate in any program. Years ago, between semesters in college, I needed to have a job. This is 1960s. I actually went out and got a job selling encyclopedias door to door. I needed a few bucks. You know what the basic rule they said to us was? If you want to sell one set of encyclopedias, you got to knock on 100 doors. That means if you want to make any money, you might have to knock on 100 doors a day, because only about 1% of the people are actually going to buy anything. They may talk, they may like it a lot, but only 1% is going to do it. It's the same thing with consumers. I have given dozens of talks. I've had over 200 articles published. I've given over 300 presentations to many, many, many consumers. I've then looked and seen what the results are. It's pitiful. In the entire state of New York, and you can ask Sustainable Westchester about this, they'll back me up, all the programs to do heat pumps for homes and buildings and companies, all of them have flopped miserably, not just in New York, but also in Massachusetts. Heat pumps cost a lot of money. Rarely can you get more than a couple of % of people to do anything. So the place to start, if you actually want to make a bang for your buck, are governments and institutions. They are more vulnerable to pressure. Most have limited funding, but many have made environmental commitments. They've talked about how to save the planet, make them do the work, push them through organizational or political activity. For those that don't know, an institution can be a school or a college, even private, the local library, the local houses of worship, a non-governmental organization, fraternal organizations, the Elks, the Rotaries, or whatever. So long as they own property where they can install things and own them, then it makes sense to go after them. You'll find that experience with the latter, the government institutions, they are your training wheels. If you're going to try to do something, start where it's easy, where you have the fewest decision makers versus the amount of greenhouse gas used. Don't go to a housing cooperative where you have to talk to 50 people on a co-op board, all of whom think they're decision makers, because you'll get nothing done. Go to a village board or a town board where there are 5 or 10 people on the board. Those are your decision makers. You can see that's a finite number of people you got to convince. Now, when you go after any of these entities, and you're going to start with the government institutions, you may work your way up to consumers at some point. Here is your basic principle. Follow this principle. Pick the pineapples before peaches. What? What's all this talk about fruit? Remember the phrase, low-hanging fruit? Always go after the fastest and biggest greenhouse gas and money returns that involve the fewest decision makers. That's how you'll get things done. Here's one of the first lists I'm going to give you. You can find these kinds of low-hanging fruit in all kinds of things at the public level. Now, you can get, or should have already gotten, a PDF of this entire presentation that'll detail all this stuff for you, so you don't have to go writing this down. The buildings, you'll find that offices, schools, DPWs, they oftentimes still have 1990s fluorescent lighting in them. It's a slam dunk to replace that lighting with LEDs. It'll pay for itself in 2 or 3 years. I got a grant to do that and sized the grant to the amount of lighting fixtures there were so that the entire program was paid for by the grant. There was no outgoing money at all. It paid for all of it. So it was very difficult to say, no, Lindsay, you can't do anything that's for free and makes us money. We got that done very quickly. Outdoor lighting. If they haven't done the street, parking lot, and park lighting yet, get it done. That's a slam dunk. NYPA will help you. And all the rest of these things. Some of these are real good short returns. Some others are not, but until you try and find out, you won't know which ones do. What you do want to avoid are these one-off token projects, like this solar-powered, wind-powered streetlight that they trotted people out and said, oh, look, we've done the streetlight. It's one little project. That was a token that they tried to use to say, we're doing things. No, too small, not worth it. Those are things that may make people feel good, but they don't lead to significant and replicable GHG reduction programs. The things I showed you in the upper list here, that's what does. Now, if you have problems trying to calculate the savings, dollars in greenhouse gas, the costs and the returns on investment, find yourself and bring on to your committee somebody with a background, a professional engineer, an energy consultant, somebody with a certified energy manager certification. That's something that's available to professionals through the Association of Energy Engineers. When I talk to professionals, first thing I say is, have you got a CEM? Have you got any kind of certification? And if this consultant says to me, oh no, but I've read a lot of stuff on Facebook, I go, get away from me, just go away. Come back after you got some kind of certification. Otherwise, you're just full of baloney. Find some of those people. They are out there. Westchester County is filled with technical people. Get them on your committee. Or if you can, find a trusted energy services contractor. Work with somebody who wants to do some of the projects I list here above, and then use them to help you on other projects, because they're going to look for that as being future possible jobs they can sell. Now, how do you compare these things? Some people say, oh yeah, if we do get rid of all the plastic straws, that's equal to putting in a nuclear plant. They go, no. You can't compare those two. They're not even in the realm of orders of magnitude. So how do you compare them? Well, unless you have unlimited money, choose based upon those things that have the biggest dollar and GHG impact, not something that will make you popular, not something that you desire or that has glitz or something you read about on Facebook. So here are the three main methods for making comparisons. The first one, and any engineer, any consultant, and it should be even a department from the public, the head of the Department of Public Works, knows how to do a simple payback calculation. It shows how fast something is going to pay for itself. You're going to put in solar. Well, how much is that relative to the electricity we're buying right now from NYPA? Is that going to save more? Is it going to pay for itself? Will it pay for itself in less than 7 years? Usually people will look for less than 5 years, but some municipalities will go for 7 years. Or if they can't figure out payback, talk to them about return on investment. That's ROI. You want to look for ROIs with a rate of investment return greater than 15%. And these two numbers are basically the same thing. ROI is just basically the reciprocal of payback, and the reverse. Payback is the reciprocal of ROI. It's how fast the money comes back. You can also look at the total cost of ownership for big ticket items, a school bus, building a building, whatever. People look and say, well, what's it going to cost over its lifetime? You also call that life cycle costs. That's the capital cost to build it and also the cost to operate and maintain it over its lifetime. In many cases, big ticket items will pay back over the lifetime compared to what's existing. That's one of the ways that a local group is trying to sell an electric bus. The electric bus is really expensive, even with the vouchers you can get for it, but they will cost much less to run and maintain. So over their lifetime, they may be cheaper than buying a brand new diesel bus. The one that you may need to do in addition to one of these two, number item 1 and 2, is the lowest capital cost to cut a metric ton of carbon per year. Why is this important? This is how NYSERDA will look at a proposal from you and they'll say, you want a grant from me? Okay, let's figure out how much carbon you're going to get rid of per year for the grant. They actually have a calculation when you go after grants where it works out the number. Things like LED lighting upgrades, they will cost you less than $3,000 per metric ton per year. You can do some projects that'll cost up to less than $1,000 per metric ton per year. Many others like heat pumps or big ticket items like solar, they may cost much more than $6,000 But remember I told you about the street light that ran on solar and wind? It was $30,000 to get rid of a metric ton. Nobody's going to give you money for that. So sometimes you need to look at all three of these and figure out, how can I use them all to try to get grant money or get a governmental entity to go along with it? Numbers 1 and 2 are important because that's how government entities and corporations think. How fast do I get the money back? Does it pay for itself faster than the thing is going to burn out? But to get money on grants, you may also have to do number 3. This means that in essence, you're going to become a project developer. That's somebody who finds an opportunity, a solar site like a rooftop, an energy efficiency measure, that's EEM. It might be LED lighting upgrade. It might be converting a boiler from oil to natural gas or to a heat pump or something. You're going to find that opportunity. You're going to look for the resources, the money, and the agency to make it happen. And you're going to find a way to organize making it happen. A request for proposal, that's an RFP, standard way to find out who can do this for you, and develop a contract with an ESCO. An ESCO is an energy services company. You need to learn the lingo. It's important. That's why I gave you a big, long glossary. What it comes down to is it's a jigsaw puzzle. Each piece of this puzzle is like a program or an asset that you need to make a project work. You don't need to know all of these. You don't even have to include all of them in a project, but 2 or 3 or 4 of these you're going to need for each project. But you know which one you're going to need more than any of them? The one that looks kind of like a COVID virus, money. If you don't have access to money, all the rest of this is just talk. It's all just organizing to nowhere. So make sure you find ways to get money. So now, let us look at an example of all the stuff I've said put into one place. Forgive me while I boast for a moment. A couple of years ago, Croton decided to review its municipal assets, one of which was the DPW garage rooftop. Nice, big, open, flat rooftop, but not in great shape. It needed work. It needed $30,000 in repairs. Nobody's going to put solar panels on a roof that's leaking because they know otherwise you're going to make them take off the panels to fix the leaks. So we said, we got to do something about this. We somehow have to fold in the repairs to the rest of this money. We looked around and saw one of the ways to do this is to set up what's called a community solar project. This is where a vendor comes in and says, yeah, I'll install the whole thing at no cost to you. You rent me out the roof for 20 years or 25 years. I will then put up the solar panels. I will sell the power and I will give you rent for that space. So we did that. We developed that project. We wanted to make sure there was a group of customers that would buy that power at a 10% discount. So we took a poll. In that poll, we said, could you please tell us, are you a low to moderate income person? Say, please self-identify. Why? Because we wanted to build in climate justice. We wanted to build in environmental justice. We wanted to insulate our people, our projects. Many people who would say later, oh, you didn't go after all the poor people. We wanted to build stuff in to make ourselves bulletproof so we would not get any negatives going along. So we got the act together, we got the list together, we found the people that needed the money. We then issued a request for inquiries or information. We went out to dozens of the solar developers, and these lists are available. NYSERDA and Sustainable Westchester can help you find them. Went out to all these solar developers and said, here's what we got. We got a rooftop. We need $30,000 and to build in here to make this thing happen. And we want to take half of the money that goes in that you give to us for rent. We negotiated $25,000. In addition to getting the roof done, fixed for nothing, we want to take half that money and put it into a village account for future greenhouse gas projects. Remember I said you need to find the money? Here, half that money goes into projects for other greenhouse gas reduction projects. You build these things at the beginning. We have 52 subscribers. They've been buying this power for over a year. 17% are low to moderate income, so we can show we also took care of the poor people. All of them are getting a 10% discount. 301 kilowatts of clean power is online. And now watch the picture. That's what it looks like when we're done. Croton paid nothing, fixed the roof, made money on the deal. This is how you develop a project. This is how you boast and say, see, it can be done, and make money on the deal. Next time, we're going to do even better. Next time, we're going to go after a 10% discount off of our municipal power bill. At the time, the law didn't allow that. The laws are continuously changing. There's also something you should know about called a customer acquisition fee. In community solar, write this one down and remember it. It costs the developer for each of his customers to sell his solar power roughly $100 to get a customer and hold on to them. There are companies that do nothing but get customers for solar developers, and they get paid a certain amount of money, which boils down to being roughly $100 per customer. If we had done this in this case for those 52 customers, we could have gotten over $5,000 for the one-time fee, simply because we got all the customers. We did the poll, we got the list. The solar company didn't have to do anything. We gave them a list and said, here's all the email addresses, here's all the names, here's the people, go after them and do it. So we would have gotten that. We are now building that in for our much bigger 4 megawatt project, where the village quite possibly will end up taking 10% discounts because we'll be able to produce more power from that project than all the municipal facilities in Croton put together. And we're going to go after that customer acquisition fee, which is a nice chunk of change we can use for other greenhouse gas reduction projects. So end of boasting. Now, if I haven't made it clear already, I'm going to give you the exact list of what to work with. Before you start any of the projects I'm going to list, you first need to check the status of the activities that may impact the viability. Don't start a project unless you know the building is going to be there for the next 25 years, for example. Or if there's a school renovation, try to fold in what you're doing to that renovation. There are 3 types of tasks: data collection, apply the technologies, and do procurement. Here are the kinds of data collection tasks in no special order that your group ought to do. You want to pursue and seek energy audits of public facilities and houses of worship. Now, you can't control whether or not the local church has had an energy audit, but you can certainly say, you know, you have a statement, you have a faith statement that says you want to save the planet. How about we look at your building and see just how efficient it is? How about we do an energy audit, or see if the rooftop could handle solar additions? Can we do that? If we get you a grant, can we do that? I know it sounds very aggressive. Be a little nicer than me. Oops, hit the button the wrong one there. You want to perform that school system GHG audit, that inventory, because as I say, that might be something really handy to have to push the school to do an energy performance contract. You want to survey your residents. Are they okay to go ahead for 100% green CCA? Have they already done it? If they've already done it, then you're finished. Use Google Maps. This is the best free tool in the world. Fly over all of your buildings and look and where there are big local rooftops. It may be something like a DPW garage. It might be a ShopRite. Make yourself a list. These are future places you want to go after. Yes, there is much for Croton to do, and we do boast about it all the time. But those are the examples to follow. People have done this stuff, not just us, but others. But going back to Google Maps, look for the big rooftops. Once you've gotten the work done for your municipal buildings and maybe your school, you might want to go to some of the other companies. We've got one that is a very large tire warehouse, beautiful rooftop. Unfortunately, they're planning to sell the building. Whoever they sell it to, we're going to go after them and say, look, you're missing money. You can rent out your rooftop, make a bunch of bucks, and cut the greenhouse gas output. If you want to push a local electric vehicle ownership, you can find out through a survey or DMV how many, they won't tell you who, but how many of them are in either your zip code or your town. I use this to find out how many more EVs have been bought in Croton every year. We're up to over 100 right now. And again, use your Google Maps. You can put into Google Maps a little statement that says electric vehicle charging, and it will bring up for you all the EV charging stations in the area that you've got on the map. And it will tell you, is it ChargePoint? Is it EV Go? Is it Blink? So you'll be able to see which ones work with what. It's all free data. Google Maps is phenomenal as a place to collect data. So much for that data collection. Now to deploy the technologies. These are places where you can actually do work at the municipal and public level, and also when you get into it, even at the smart home level. You have probably already done in your community replacement of the traffic lights lamps with LEDs, because the state has already done this in a lot of places. But if it hasn't been done, that's a slam dunk. When people use incandescent lamps in traffic lights, they burn out twice or 3 times a year. Put in an LED unit, it's not going to burn out for 10 or 15 years. That alone, the DPW is going to say, oh, what a great idea. We don't have to go around and keep getting up on a ladder and fixing those lamps. I'm at it. Install and set programmable thermostats. Do your public buildings have programmable thermostats that turn the heat down at night or possibly turn off the cooling on weekends? If not, slam dunk. Replace all those high intensity discharge street and parking lot and park lights with LED units. Again, NYPA is perfect for that. They'll help you do that. Upgrade the lighting in your public buildings to LEDs and controls, things that shut the lights off when there's nobody in the room, called occupancy sensors. Look at the rest of this list. I won't even go through all of them right now. These are things you need to do to deploy the technologies. Energy smart homes, that's good for residentials. If that's not ever been done before, go after it. This is something that, once again, you can help people to learn what they need to do in their own homes. And then finally, let's look at how all this stuff gets bought. Here you go. Procurement options. Towns and villages buy all kinds of stuff. Can you implement 100% green so that for that the residents and small businesses are able to buy green community choice aggregation? That has to be enabled by your village or town. Does your village or town have any municipal property that's unused that could be for community solar, like renting out a rooftop? Push energy performance contracts, especially at schools and other public facilities. For non-commercial sites, like a library, for example, or a daycare center, talk to people that run them and say, could you possibly buy 25% or more of your power green? Those are sites that are not eligible for CCA. Promote carbon offsets to counter any ongoing fossil fuel use. You can replace an old boiler with a new boiler, take out an oil boiler and put in a gas boiler, reduce the carbon, but it won't reduce it to zero. There's still more carbon being produced. Think about the carbon offsets. Replace those publicly owned gas-driven vehicles with electric vehicles. Our basic rule is anytime we've got to replace a vehicle, we're going to do it with either an electric vehicle or a plug-in hybrid. We've got 3 so far done already, and we have the chargers already for them because we got grants for them years ago. Can your truck and bus fuels be changed to something that is an alternative until the large electric vehicles are available? This is a tough road to hoe. It's one we're working on right now. There are alternative fuels like B10 or B20 that can be used to reduce the output of greenhouse gases from something like a garbage truck or a large truck. Stuff still works. They don't have to change anything in the units. The fuel will work in the same vehicle. It won't bring it down to zero. You may only save 10%, but that's greater than zero. And for anything that heats a building, look for cleaner heating fuels, B10 or B20. Natural gas is cheap, less GHG productive than oil. Doesn't get you to zero, but it's better. Heat pumps if you can afford them. And remember, never propose an action, any of these things, without first figuring out what's it going to cost and what's it going to save. Otherwise, somebody's going to say to you, oh, that's a great idea. What's it going to cost me? If you turn around and say, oh, I don't know, I haven't figured it out yet, you're going to look like a fool. So have this stuff ready ahead of time. And be creative. Don't be stuck just with Lindsay's lists. There's all kinds of other stuff you can come up with. And who knows, you may have a skating rink, something we don't have in Croton, that might be a very big energy user. Go after that. It's a real opportunity in many cases. Now, to conclude, how do we make this stuff actually happen? Here's a thought experiment. I'm going to now make you feel uneasy. Ready to feel uneasy? What is stopping you right now, from switching to an electric vehicle? Oh, it costs a lot of money. I haven't got a charger, blah, blah, blah. If you're going to ask yourself, other people to do it, you have to ask yourself first. How much are you willing to spend on an electric vehicle or a home energy project like a heat pump that may take years or never to pay off? Don't ask other people to do things you haven't thought about doing yourself. And when you're asked these questions, do you feel uncomfortable or cornered or maybe even resentful? That's common. So here's the real question. What would make you want to spend your own money on greenhouse gas reductions? Things that will pay themselves back. That means you need to think like a customer, not an activist. You can't harangue people to spend their money. You have to show them some ways in which it'll be beneficial. Some will do it just to save the world. Many, many more will do it if it will save them some money. So always be ready with those persuasive 30-second elevator speeches. Compress what you got to say down to 30 seconds or a minute. Otherwise, attention is gone. figure out ways to compress and focus your attention and focus your resources. Be ready with the payback and the greenhouse gas data to make your case. And now for the final statement in the boot camp aspect of our show. All of this is going to feel like an uphill climb in the dark. If it doesn't feel that way, you're still doing the easy stuff. If you're not ready to go after the uphill battle, you're not going to make it. But remember one thing, the only way you get to the top is by going uphill. And when you get there, there is a sense of joy and achievement that you cannot get otherwise. You'll have done something great for your community. You'll have done something for your planet. You'll have done something for yourself. And you'll give you the energy to go forth and climb another mountain in the dark. So for those of you that are willing to climb the mountain in the dark, I say thank you very much for helping to protect the planet. If you want to look up for more resources, look at the information that's in the glossary and the web links that I provided in the appendices sent to you. And that is the end of our show.
Thank you so much, Lindsay.
Questions, comments? I hope to get clarification on something you said in part 1. I think it was that Con Ed emits 7, it should be, hold on a second. Should be 0.7 pounds of CO2 per kilowatt hour. Now, whereas previously with Indian Point, it was about 0.55 pounds. Is that right? Where is this info available? Normally, it should be available from the EPA under something they call eGrid. That's E-G-R-I-D. You can actually Google on eGrid and you'll get there. But unfortunately, eGrid is updated only about every 2 or 3 years. So eGrid still shows 554 or 0.554 pounds per kilowatt hour or 554 pounds per megawatt hour. They haven't updated it. I did a calculation based upon the 2 combined cycle gas-fired power plants that have replaced Indian Point, did my calculations, and I came up with about 0.7 pounds. That's closer. EPA will eventually get around to doing eGrid with no nuclear in Westchester County, and then it should come out to about 0.7, maybe 0.8. But that's the number I use to be realistic about how much greenhouse gas savings can be had by avoiding 1 kilowatt hour in the Con Ed territory. Do not use New York State average numbers you get from NYSERDA, because those numbers are exceptionally low. Why? Because much of upstate New York gets hydro or nuclear power. And if you mix all that in with our 70% of electricity that comes from natural gas, you end up with a ridiculously low number at the state level, which cannot be applied at the local level. Remember I told you, focus on local? So for Con Ed, you can use 0.7 pounds. That's Lindsay's number. It may even be a little low. NYSERDA has a number when you're doing energy projects that looks not at the average over the whole system, but at what they call the non-base load. That is electricity used primarily during the daytime. That comes out to about 1.1 pounds per kilowatt hour. So if you're going to do something like changing LED lights that are only on during the daytime, you could use the 1.1 pounds because eventually NYSERDA is going to use that number anyway in order to demonstrate what your grant is saving. So 0.7 is the real number. 1.1 is the kind that NYSERDA uses right now. Municipal administration that is so reluctant to address climate. Well, you sometimes have to twist some arms. That's the point of leverage. But Lindsay, what do you realistically estimate to be the possible energy conservation by consumers in Westchester? Okay. Are we looking at 5 years, 10 years, or 50 years? If we're looking only at 5 years, which is really the most realistic number we can look at right now, you should figure that if every home upgraded as much as it could with normal dollars that are available, they might be able to cut 10 to 20% of their greenhouse gas output. That's for people that are homeowners. If you're going to do this for commercial industrial, it's very different based upon whether it's a skating rink or a food market or whatever. But generally, you'll find that 10 to 20% is typically what can be saved by doing the most cost-effective things in almost any kind of entity. I do this stuff all the time. If I walk up to a building and look at it, I can see if they're still using old style fluorescent lamps. I know I can get 30 or 40% savings on the lighting, but that may only be a small portion of the overall building load. 10 to 20% is pretty good what you can do most of the time. That you can do in less than 5-year paybacks. You want to do something like heat pumps? Whoa, that's a lot of money. There you're looking at buildings that are being rebuilt or built from scratch. If you say the next building that gets built in whatever, another town in Westchester, I don't want to use names, the next one that gets built has to have heat pump as its heat source instead of a boiler. That can be built into a new building cost effectively, much more easily than you can do it for an existing building. So I will say that you can reduce the greenhouse gas by 30 to 40% over 20 years or more, because you're replacing buildings during that time. You are never going to get to zero without also putting up an enormous amount of solar rooftop, solar parking lot, solar over everything, or possibly buying that electricity from something like offshore wind. Because here's an example for you, and this comes straight from the Department of Energy. The best building you can put up, if it's more than 5 stories tall, cannot produce enough energy to allay all of its carbon output unless you have on the outside land or build an enormous giant rooftop bigger than the building itself to suck up enough solar to counter everything that you can't get done, reducing it, to heat the building or whatever. Even a heat pump requires electricity, which requires fuel, which causes greenhouse gases. Too many people say, oh, I'm going to put heat pumps, now get rid of all my greenhouse gases. No, it doesn't. It just transfers it to coming out of a power plant instead of out of your boiler. Yes, it'll be less, but it won't be zero. So you're talking a 5-year frame, 10 to 20%. 20-year frame, 30 to 40%. Zero, you're talking longer than many of us have life left to live, 50 years or more. You're not going to make it in 2030. You're not going to make it in 2050. And be ready for the fact that we're going to have to deal with a lot of climate change during that time. I hope that clarifies the difficulty we face.
Yeah, Lindsay, let me just say that I recognize that's actually really good numbers on your part. I think that sounds realistic what you're saying, and I agree with it. What I'm thinking is that because of the rather extreme situation that we face, building political will behind things could be enhanced by engaging people as individuals on what they can also do day by day, moment by moment, to improve the situation. And so what I actually have, I mean, I confess, 18 years in California, and we went through some severe situations in California where the people power of conservation added to the sense of commitment to supporting the government in doing the right thing to deal with the environment. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, despite the fact that consumer conservation can produce only limited, effect, maybe we should at the same time encourage entities that are good at public education to really actually try to amp up the personal commitment in how we are dealing with climate, so that government efforts are amplified and shown to be, maximally, optimally effective. It's just, I think we need to not rely just on the government to fix it and change the infrastructure. I think we have to get each individual, as well as every level of government, totally committed to working together for this goal.
I agree completely. And the thing I think you should understand is that we're talking right now in this class just about reducing greenhouse gas at the municipal level and then working forward to that. Nothing says that's the only thing.
Right.
Working individually, that's not the only thing. There's plenty more stuff to do. You still have to do all the carrying of the signs and the haranguing, but understand that none of these things is sufficient. All of them are necessary, but you need to do all of them to get anywhere.
Yeah, I know we're on the same page. I'm just saying that maybe at the end of your presentations, you could also include that, also encouraging people to conserve, creates political support and will and commitment and engagement with the whole enterprise of government, and amplifies the effect of these measures by the government, because every effort by the government will be amplified if people are also engaging in conservative behavior, right?
That was the first class. That was the hour a week ago. All that, most of that was what you can do at your individual level.
Yeah, you're right. So they're integrated. They're integrated programs. I so appreciate what you do. You're really, really excellent. It's an excellent presentation, and I've learned so much what I can do with my municipality. So thank you.
And do look at the long 14-page Word document. It has lots and lots of URLs and links to get you further along in this process. Are there any other comments or questions or anything? Then kudos to all of you for having survived to this point. It's a long hour and a half, but a lot of information.
Thank you, Lindsay. I'm sure people, as they digest, will have more questions, but that was wonderful again. All right, well, if no one has any other questions, know that you will receive this recording shortly in the next few days, and I hope that you will all stay in touch with both Lindsay and myself in the future.
Thank you very much and have a good evening.
All right, good night, everyone.